Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
It is our basic human right to be fucked up.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Occultae Veritatis.
Hello, occultists. I am Richard Bigley, and we are in for a long haul episode on this one. I think you're going to enjoy, it being paced out as opposed to like one massive behemoth episode. So, anyway, in studio with me today, I have
Sage Murray,
Leon Felger,
and
Ood Gallifrey.
All right, so yeah.
What about the radio demon?
Oh yeah, and the radio demon.
You don't have to introduce me. Everyone knows me. I'm the most famous member of Offpod.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, very much.
Mm-hmm. As well, you should be.
So this is pretty heavy, and when I wrote it, I didn't really write any room for a poison in it, so let's just get to it right now.
So, what's your poison?
So, what's your poison?
All right, so today we are falling back to our traditional comfort beer, the original 16 Canadian Pale Ale by Great West Brewing.
It's delicious.
It is delicious.
And it sounds really crisp when you open the can.
And in 1784, the 16 Druid Kings of Saskatchewan defeated the Ice Giants and founded this beer company.
They did.
Yeah.
The 16 Druid Kings.
Did I get that correct, Leon?
Yes.
Super duper.
Fuck yeah.
Named after the original 16 Druid Kings.
Yep. Of Saskatchewan.
Of Saskatchewan.
I rate this beer a 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. It's a comfort beer.
It's a comfort beer.
Yeah, it's nice. It's cold. It's beer. It's not too
I'm always
hoppy.
happy to have one.
Yeah, I've never said no to an original 16.
No.
It's very inoffensive, very crisp, and it's, even in our household, which two of the three hosts, I don't know, do they know you live here?
Yeah, I live here.
Yeah. Whenever we get money for empties or extra cash or pocket change that goes into the beer tip jar, 016 is most likely going to be bought with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's get into it.
The city of Saskatoon is Saskatchewan's river city, developed around the shores of the South Saskatchewan River. Currently the largest city in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon has become a cultural hub with many theaters, restaurants, art galleries, music venues, and historic buildings calling it home. Booming with opportunity, culture, and beauty, now is a great time to come and pay a visit to the city of Saskatoon.
Saskatoon is a city connected by bridges and divided by race. It has the largest urban population of Aboriginal people in a province with the highest youth incarceration rate in North America. In Saskatchewan, a young Aboriginal man is more likely to go to jail than finish high school.
It's okay, girls. It's okay. It's okay.
I just wanted the babysitters for now.
Few people understand the history behind the statistics, and many don't care.
What are your conditions? No drinking, no weapons.
Okay. What else?
Oh, you're gonna search me for a weapon?
Yeah, I am too.
Don't be nervous.
Okay, you got a curfew on you?
Not that I know of.
Okay, Mike, keep your hands in your pocket, buddy. Hands in your pocket. Okay, what's gonna happen here is that you're gonna stay exactly put, all right? until the other car gets here, and then I'm just going to patch for weapons, check and see if you've got a curfew, all right? Nothing sudden or I'll put you on the ground, you understand? Understand that, eh?
Aboriginal people in the prairies have coped with assaults led by the church and the Canadian government, residential school abuse, discriminations in the Indian Act, racism, and despair. These are the people the Saskatoon police meet on a nightly basis.
So Dan Hatchen and Ken Munson of the Saskatoon Police Service, they're a bunch of big old assholes. In January 2000, Darrell Knight, an indigenous man, was dropped off on the outskirts of Saskatoon. He had walked for a couple of miles and then was able to get to the nearby Queen Elizabeth Power Station to call a taxi and had suffered no ill effects. He later, a couple days later, met up with Saskatoon police over another incident and told them about his experience with Dan Hatchen and Ken Munson. And anyway, this launched an investigation, and the two officers involved basically claimed that they had simply given Darrell Knight a ride home and dropped him off at his own request. But, well, the reality was it was an unlawful confinement that occurred in September 2001, and they were sentenced to 8 months in prison. Yeah, it was the subject actually of a National Film Board documentary called Two Worlds Colliding by Tasha Hubbard.
As soon as I got outside, I seen two cops, and they must have thought I was the one causing the problems or something. Handcuffed me and took me to the car, and I'm thinking I didn't break no laws, so I didn't do nothing wrong, and took me away. And they drove me out of town. Scared the heck out of me. I thought I was dead. All those rumors I heard in the past, they were all coming true. When they told me, Darrell, get the heck out, well, they swore, out, you effing Indian. I told them, I'll freeze to death out here, you guys. And they stopped. You can hear the tires crunching on the snow. And I can hear the electric window go down. And I remember that driver there said, that's your effing problem. And they drove away.
Darrell Knight's experience, as well as the experience from a number of other indigenous people who were, I guess, found at the outskirts of the city in various locations. It was a thing that they wanted to look into to kind of get to the bottom of, because this was a recurring thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for some context about how, a lot of Saskatoon and I guess Saskatchewan people view our indigenous populations. It's a very racist place. Joni Mitchell, a lot of people in Saskatoon don't like her because she called us out on the city's racism. If you flash back to our Colton Boushie episode, after Colton was murdered, there were local politicians saying that the only problem was that the shooter had left witnesses, and this was coming from like local politicians.
Yeah, it was super fucked up.
So, I mean, the general attitude towards indigenous people here sucks, and we've kind of got a clip here that we've got from the Two Worlds Colliding documentary, which really highlights this fact.
Constables Ken Munson and Dan Hatchen admit to abandoning Darrell Knight in the cold at the edge of town. As the case progresses, emotions run high in the city of Saskatoon. Thoughts that usually remain unsaid are now in the open.
Why are these two taking the blame for everyone that's dead?
Blame.
It's not their fault that everyone's
They're
dead.
just lucky that Darrell Knight found a phone to phone a cab.
Darrell Knight, please. What about his arrest record? What about the trouble that man's been in?
Does that mean he should die?
No, that doesn't mean he should die. Nobody should die. No one at all should have to die.
Your
and
kind
pay the
of
price.
racism is what I've been fighting.
No,
all
I'm
my
not
life.
racist because my friends are Indian as well.
Anyone that says I'm not
my
best friends are Indian. Racist.
But
Some
I
of
may
my
have.
best friends are Indian.
Some
too.
of my friends are, and yeah, I have a certain amount of racism because I've dealt with enough of native that have caused me nothing but hell and havoc. Broke into my homes.
White people
Okay?
have done that to me.
Well,
my nose
fine.
is broken. I have.
How many
burn holes in
beers
me.
do you
I
drink
have
and how much
burn marks
bingo do
on
you
my
do?
Body.
And how much welfare are you guys on?
So yeah, how about that, eh? She includes the I'm not racist, I have Indian friends, and then follows it up with a straight up I have a little bit of racism.
I'm maybe just a little bit
a
of
little
racist.
bit racist, maybe. And yeah, so that's
how many beers do you drink and how much welfare are you on?
Yeah.
And like speaking as a white guy in Saskatchewan, like for some reason other white guys seem to have a habit of like when they get comfortable with me, they'll like confess like their racist feelings to me.
Oh yeah, me too.
It's happened over and over and over again where I start to get to know somebody at a job or at a social event or something like that, and all of a sudden they'll start to speak about, man, all these fucking natives are ruining the town, eh? Like, and like they confide in me their bigoted feelings, and like it gave me the impression that so many people out there just have racism just under the surface.
I get that too. Like at work, I work up north, and I work with quite a few older white men, and after they hang out with me for a bit, and if I haven't like said anything about my beliefs, they just start being like, "Oh, these fucking Indians, blah blah. My sister owns a rental, and they just cut up deer. These fucking Indians. No one should rent to them. Blah 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 blah." And then I, depending on how drunk I am at the time of the encounter, I either yell at them or I pretend that I have to go wash my hair. Yucky, super fucked up.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, you don't have to scratch terribly hard beneath the surface of a lot of the people here to get their beliefs, or I guess to have them expose their
have them come to the fore.
Racist beliefs. So, yeah, Saskatoon police are certainly no exception to this. They, I guess, seem to have a habit of taking indigenous people, dropping them off out in the outskirts of the city, often in freezing weather.
Right after the T-Pain and Nelly concert, we went for some drinks afterwards because, just because it was a date night. And my significant other was waiting inside for me. I mean, I'm not too big of a smoker, but I went outside for a cigarette, decided to have a cigarette. And I was approached by a black SUV with two police officers inside. I don't really know the names. I don't remember their faces. I was quite inebriated, but that's nothing to do with, they had no right to do what they did. I had cab money. I wasn't being belligerent or rude in any way. I complied with them because, I mean, as a coach, you got to do a CPIC every 6 months to attend the summer and winter games. So I complied with their orders. And they told me to get in a vehicle. They told me to, I was under the impression we were going downtown. And next thing you know, we're on Circle Drive and heading to the outskirts of town, which would be Preston and Highway 11. Last thing I remember was, them kind of, belittling me and driving away. I felt humiliated and betrayed, and I've never felt that before. So it's all new to me. I mean, yeah, it wasn't okay. I mean, how long has this been going on? How many people has this happened to? They haven't come forward. It's not okay. We need to address this situation.
There was a Mr. Naistus and Mr. Wegner. There was a Lloyd Dustyhorn in January 2000, a Darcy Dean Ironchild in February of 2000, and with the subject of this episode, Neil Stonechild, in November of 1990. The investigations into the deaths of Dustyhorn, Ironchild, and Naistus were concluded, and it was determined that there basically wasn't enough evidence to press any sort of charges.
Of course not.
Of course not. The Minister of Justice had then, upon finding this out, had ordered a coroner's inquest into these 3 deaths. These inquests had been completed by the time Stonechild's inquest had also been done. So investigation into the death of Mr. Stonechild was concluded, and it was initially determined that there was not sufficient evidence to lay charges against the police officers who were last seen with him. However, there was evidence that Mr. Stonechild had contact with members of the Saskatoon Police Service the day he was last seen alive. So there was the Neil Stonechild inquiry, which was conducted to look into this matter, but the inquiry was not given any authority to make a civil or criminal determination in liability. So it's basically they just go out there, interview people, look up whatever they can find, get all the facts together, and, make a determination as to what exactly happened. But they had no capacity to, discipline or direct.
Or really do anything
or
about
really
it.
do anything. Just get all the information out there so we've got it compiled.
And just say, Nate.
Yeah, so like I said, no civil liability could be determined by this inquiry, no criminal liability either.
And that, that's just more of the thin blue line old boys club. Like, the threshold to quote unquote suspect a citizen of wrongdoing is so much lower than to suspect an officer of wrongdoing, because how could that happen? They're such good people, moral people. They would never do that.
No, of course not.
Neil Stonechild and the Starlight Tours. It's been 10 years since the anniversary of Justice David Wright's report into the inquiry into the death of Neil Stonechild. The Starlight Tours were allegations that police dumped troublesome and drunk Aboriginal men on the outskirts of the city. Neil Stonechild was 17 when he went missing on a stormy winter night in 1990. His body was found 5 days later in a field on the outskirts of the city. Darrell Knight came forward 10 years later to say that he'd been dumped on the outskirts of town on a freezing night. It was the same weekend that 2 other Aboriginal men were found frozen to death in the same area. The matter resulted in an inquiry, a public inquiry into the death of Neil Stonechild.
So about the inquiry itself, there was 43 days of hearings held throughout the province. Evidence included testimony of 63 witnesses, and there was 197 exhibits. In all, if you take all the transcripts and evidence and everything that inquiry produced, there was 8,506 pages of it for you.
Fuck.
So this is certainly a research-heavy episode because I wrote it.
The inquiry is what, 8,000 pages?
8,500.
8,500 pages. He went through that just to try and get a good definitive view of this case. So patreon.com/ovpod. We're putting in hours for you guys.
Yep.
Yes, it was a lot of research, and
we had a lot of furious long paragraphs
in
of
our group
a message
chat,
in our group chat at 3 a.m.
being like, what the fuck? How did this happen?
Yeah.
Why didn't anyone do anything?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it should make you enraged as well as educated as well as maybe entertained. It's what we're here for. So anyway, the inquiry had found that there'd be no evidence that the Saskatoon Police Service had received any formal written complaint against any of its members in relation to the Stonechild matter. So nobody formally wrote the police service to complain about the handling of Neil Stonechild's, case. That said, the inquiry had found that there were a number of complaints received by the police service, including information that was provided to members of the police service by Jason Roy, who was Neil Stonechild's friend, who gave that night that Stonechild went missing He gave the police the fake name of Tracy Lee Horace. Complaints from the Stonechild family were actually literally published on the front page of the Star Phoenix, which is like Saskatoon's daily city newspaper.
Yeah.
Basically complaining about the adequacy of the investigation into Neil Stonechild's death. And even internal complaints by the members of the Saskatoon Police Service were later to be found out. However, because I guess nobody had formally written to the police service with a formal complaint, the complaint process that was mandated at the time under the Police Act in Saskatchewan was never actually initiated by the Saskatoon Police Service in response to any of these complaints, both internally from officers, from Stonechild's friends and family, or what was actually like literally published in the newspaper.
So because they didn't write like a proper letter with the proper words in it and sent through the proper channels, that all these mountains of evidence were basically just like, fuck it.
Well, it wasn't mountains of evidence, it was mountains of complaints.
Mountains of
but
complaints.
But it was, and they were just like, well, no one formally complained in writing as Amanda, so we're not going to look into this.
No one sent in letters with stamps.
It's excuse via bureaucracy. Like, was there injustice done or not? Not did they complain in the correct avenues, using the correct formats? Like,
using the special form that they need to get.
Yeah, that's not how we should do justice. That's bullshit. Yeah.
So, according to evidence provided at the inquiry about the night that Neil Stonechild was last seen alive, Constable Larry Hartwig and Constable Bradley Senger of the Saskatoon Police Service were dispatched to remove Stonechild from the Snowberry Downs apartment complex, a few blocks away from my house, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The complaint was called in by a Trent Ewert. This fact was irrefutably established in the inquiry as police records and witness testimony and the officer's own notebooks all acknowledge that this is what happened. So the police were dispatched. 5 minutes after they were dispatched, they were on scene based on the electronic police records that they had kept at the time. At 11:59, it's found that they run a search on Stonechild and find he has outstanding warrants. At 12:17 a.m., they report back to the police station or whatever as being in service and ready for the next call. At 12:18 a.m., Constable Hartwig and Constable Senger are sent to investigate a suspicious person on O'Regan Crescent, a few blocks away from the Snowberry Downs apartments. They report to be on scene at 12:24 a.m., 6 minutes later. Now, here's the fun fact. It does not take 6 minutes to go from Snowberry Down to O'Regan Crescent. Even if you catch the only red light on the way, you will still make it there before 6 minutes.
Right.
So at 12:27, they report to be in service again. So from 12:24 to 12:27, they conducted their call on O'Regan. Then at 12:30, they run a search on the name of Trent Ewert, the person who had originally called in the complaint at Snowberry Downs. Hartwig was the most senior of the officers. In the inquiry, Hartwig had remembered responding to an assault complaint, which had originated at a nightclub. He also recalled attending a residence to notify a woman that her husband had killed their 2 young sons and then himself. And now one could understand why you would remember that second call.
Right, that's
a big
one.
Deal.
Yeah.
Especially in Saskatoon, like that's not a every week occurrence.
Well, it's like in also 1990 Saskatoon.
Yeah, like it's like, hey, miss, your husband killed your kids and then himself. Like that's a big thing. That's a big fucking deal. You can remember that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of weird that he would remember the first call about the assault at a nightclub, because that was a pretty unremarkable call. It's probably some drunk guys getting into a fight or whatever. And
I've been assaulted at several nightclubs. It's
exactly.
Never called the police about it, but
Yeah, but
I work as a bouncer. Me too.
Yeah. So he remembered that assault call and he remembered the other call. But further to that, Hartwig claimed that he had no recollection of the events of 24th, except for those 2 calls noted above, and he denied that Stonechild was in the car the night of November 24th / 25th of 1990. Now, despite noting that Stonechild was in his notebook and reviewing his notes from his notebooks from that night, it didn't help him recall that event when he was at the inquiry. So his mind didn't remember the Stonechild thing at all.
It's like it never happened.
Even though he had time to go over his notebooks.
Yeah, even despite going over your notebooks.
Mr. Commissioner, the next witness is Constable Larry Hartwig.
Did you, sir, have Neil Stonechild in your custody on November 24th or 25th of 1990?
No, I did not.
Is it possible, sir, that you mistakenly had him in your custody in the sense that perhaps he was in your custody, gave you a false name, and you didn't realize it was Neil Stonechild? Do you think that's possible?
No, I do not believe that's possible.
You were talking to the RCM police about the death of people, right? Human beings.
Correct.
Frozen to death.
Correct.
Right? Inexplicably.
Correct.
And there was some suggestion at that point in time, even in the media, that there was some kind of involvement by the Saskatoon Police Service.
Correct.
You were quite aware of that?
Yes, I was.
So you didn't try for a moment to downplay the seriousness of this. You knew going into your discussions with Staff Sergeant Lyons that this is a serious situation.
Absolutely.
Right. And so you turn the conversation to the death of Neil Stonechild, right?
I turned the conversation to Neil Stonechild. Sergeant Lyons turned the conversation to the death of Neil Stonechild.
Now, am I missing something here? Isn't that the same thing?
So.
Is that the same thing?
No, it's not.
All right.
Why would you even raise the name of Neil Stonechild? Isn't that what you're asking, Mr. Wood?
I was trying to get to that.
What earthly reason would there be for you to mention the name Neil Stonechild in this context?
Because I knew the RCMP were investigating the death of Neil Stonechild. They asked me about people I did not know about. The only person that I knew was Neil Stonechild.
So when he was asked about reporting at scene that night, he indicated they must have pressed it while they were in the area, as opposed to actually being at the scene. So, you're supposed to push it when you arrive.
Yeah.
But they were kind of close enough, so they just pushed it as they were close,
Just ish, yeah.
I wonder if citizens are allowed to do that. Like if a prosecutor brings forward and say, hey, the cell tower pinged off your cell phone, you can just be like, oh, I just fudged it. I just drove by. They're being given a level of scrutiny that's way lower than if a citizen was in the same situation.
Even reporting into work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I may have been half an hour late, but it was close enough to on time, so so it's on time, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Also of note is that his notes didn't actually make any reference to the original complainant, which was Trent Ewert, which is also kind of interesting that he didn't note that, despite him running a search against them.
Yeah.
So, it's like, well, I'm going to run a search on this guy and see if he's got any warrants, but I'm not going to write anything down about him in my notebook.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So anyway, the temperature that night was minus 28 Celsius. For our American friends, that is minus 18.5 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's cold.
It's cold.
And, for people that haven't lived in a cold environment like this, Saskatchewan is also very flat, so that cold is often accompanied by very swift winds.
Mm-hmm.
The chances of hypothermia skyrocket, in Saskatchewan, because you're subject to both the cold temperatures and the winds to cool your body down just that much faster.
Well, and also, you breathe in, and your nose hairs freeze, and you breathe out, and they thaw. That's...
Yeah, and your glasses fog up, and you take your scarf off, and it's got, caked ice on it because of the condensation of your breath.
That's right.
Freezing up against the fabric. So, it gets fucking cold here.
Yeah.
Anyway, Constable Hartwig had agreed that a warrant for the arrest of Stonechild was on the system on November 24/25th, 1990. He testified that if he had encountered Stonechild, he would have arrested him and taken him to detention because, you find a guy, he's got a warrant, he's in your custody.
Take him to jail.
Take him to jail.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
He's got some administrative business that needs to be looked after at the police station.
Yeah, that's supposed to be part of the checks and balances so that abuse by, like, corrupt cops can't be done. Because there's cameras and other accountability and shit at the station. Or at least that's the way it should be.
Exactly. The timing of them running the name of the original complainant, Trent Ewert, was also curious, given that they had cleared Stonechild, or they had cleared the Stonechild matter 13 minutes earlier. So it's like, this guy complained about Stonechild. We got there. Now we've just finished up with our business here. We've cleared it. We're back in station now, or we're back in service now. And then we're going to run the name of the guy who originally called in the complaint. Well, it seems like kind of weird because, you think before you flip back into service,
you would do that work.
You would do all that work before.
Yeah.
So, 13 minutes later, after clearing him, they ran a search on Trent's name. Hartwig had no recollection of the event he responded to on Oregon either. Furthermore, from 12:30 a.m. to 1:39 a.m., over an hour, there was no activity on the police record system from Constable Hartwig and Constable Senger. Their notebooks also silent. No names were run. No evidence of where they were, what they were doing. Now, imagine being a cop and getting, no late-night calls on Saskatoon's west side for over an hour.
That's not happening.
You're just driving around?
Yeah.
Yeah. For those of you that aren't familiar, it's petty crime is happening in Saskatoon a lot because there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of there's a lot of discrimination. There's a lot of inequality creating crime within the city. There's not a proper support structure. So on any given night, there should be a lot of crime happening around that time.
Well, I have the cop app, and you can see when crime happens and where it happens, and there's no way that it would be an hour without
somebody
something
calling on the west side, which is where they were patrolling that night.
Yeah.
So for over an hour, there was absolutely no activity with these officers.
Jason Roy was apparently right at this intersection here, so I would have talked to Jason Roy, right? Because I would have been driving the car that night. Well, I don't remember any of this. Yeah, I don't remember even taking the call, right? There's no doubt we did. I mean, it's written in my notebook, so we obviously took the call. Wow. So, I mean, I wrote the alias that Jason Roy used in my notebook, Tracy Lee Horst. There's a reason why he was run twice on CPIC, and it's probably because nothing came back up under the alias, right? So I challenged him. Again, I don't have any recollection, but this is my normal practice. This is what we do, right? We ran Neil's name because, I mean, it's normal to run the subject of the call on CPIC while you're en route or when you arrive at scene. At scene is not a literal designation all the time. I might be at scene of a car accident and never see the accident. I might be at scene 3 blocks away directing traffic. We arrived at scene here. So the first question somebody would ask is, how could we already have Neil Stonechild in custody when we were at scene?
The evidence all indicates that. The fact that I was duped into believing the possibility that I might have encountered Neil Stonechild was only as a result of my faith in the RCMP that they were competent, honest, and fair.
Second question.
But again, when in the absence of information, a person can and will adopt erroneous information as fact.
This spot in particular, it's a very traumatizing spot for me. I've never actually sat in this, stood here ever since that night. And the cop was looking at me right here and asking me questions, and Neil's in the back, bloody face, asking for my help, and Neil was sitting there with his back, his hands behind his back, just yelling at me, man, help me, help me, help me. These guys are gonna kill me, and I was just like, relax, man, relax. Everything's all right, man. You're gonna go back to jail. That's it. That's all. Just calm down. And he was fucking terrified, man. And I really didn't put it together until he was gone, and it really didn't make that much sense to me. Like, I was so young at that time, and I just didn't know how to put it together, and it just bothered the shit out of me. I don't know.
Fast forward to March of 2000, Hartwig is getting interviewed on the death of Neil Stonechild. The investigator who's looking into this is interviewing Hartwig. Hartwig says they were going to a call of a suspicious person of a B&E in progress, the break and enter. They found Neil. He was drunk at the time. Now, Hartwig said that he gathered this information from newspaper reports that he had reviewed prior to meeting with the investigator. Now, the investigator makes no reference to Hartwig getting the info from the newspaper. Constable Hartwig also testified that he read the name Tracy Lee Horse in the newspaper. It was found in cross-examination that such information did not appear in newspaper reports, nor did it appear in any media presented to the inquiry.
Interesting. That.
So he learned all this stuff that he had forgotten. And he learned it through reviewing media at the time, the newspaper.
That didn't actually exist.
That didn't actually mention, the names of Tracy Lee Horse, despite using the name Tracy Lee Horse in the interview.
Weird. It's almost like he knew only stuff that somebody involved would know.
That's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the end, the inquiry found, and quote, "I cannot accept that Constable Hartwig simply forgot about the search for Stonechild when he learned of the death, or that he failed to recognize the complaint might have some significance to the investigation into Stonechild's death. In all of the circumstances, his assertion that he did not recall what happened is simply not credible. I conclude that he recalled what happened, and his assertions are a deliberate deception designed to conceal his involvement." So this inquiry, which cannot lay any criminal or civil liability, just found Hartwig to I guess summarize it. They're calling him a fucking liar.
Yeah, they basically called him the fuck out.
Yeah, so he's a fucking liar, just saying shit to try to hide his involvement in this.
Yeah.
I think what's lost in reading through this is Hartwig, was it?
Yes.
From what I read from reading through this argument, like he was considered like a senior officer, like an officer to set the example for the juniors, to like, to teach and guide and shape the young officers.
Yeah.
A mentor.
Yeah.
This is guy that's setting the example.
Well, and that's what I'm moving to now. Is Hartwig's partner that night, Bradley Senger, was the newbie. He joined the police service in January of that year, so he was on there for less than a year.
Little baby cop.
Little baby cop, exactly. Constable Senger had recorded the complaint involving Stonechild in his notebook. So Hartwig didn't write it down, but Senger did in his notebook. There were no other names recorded. Constable Senger had testified that he had no recollection of the events of November 24th and 25th of 1990, other than his involvement of notifying the woman about the death of her husband and two sons. He denied transporting Neil Stonechild to the North Industrial Area of Saskatoon. He also denied that he had any knowledge as to who did take Stonechild there.
Also, the North Industrial Area is far the fuck away from any public transit. It's all just a bunch of like warehouse buildings.
Yeah.
Even in
buses don't go there.
Even in 2020, buses still don't really go there.
No,
after
buses
a
don't go
certain
there.
Hour.
No.
It's dead. There's no, it's just industrial businesses that run, like
9 to 5.
9 to 5 or 6 to 6 or
anyone
6
there
to
is
7.
working a late shift
or doing drugs.
Or doing drugs.
Like there's really
Not even. There are better places to do drugs.
yeah.
than the
There's
North
nothing
Industrial
there, outside of regular operating hours.
Well, like they picked him up on the west side and brought him all the way the fuck over to the north end, which is very far away from anything that he'd probably, be familiar with.
Yeah, it's way the fuck out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So Senger was on the day shift of November 29th, 1990, when he received a call advising that a body, which turned out to be a body of Neil Stonechild, had been found. Senger stated that he did not recall many details. He didn't recall any of the press surrounding Stonechild's death, Now, this may seem normal and inconsequential, but imagine you encounter someone one night and then days later find out that their frozen body was found literally on your next shift.
Yeah.
Like, you don't think that that kind of information would be etched in your brain. Your experience with that person would...
Yeah. No, that sounds like bullshit. I still remember shit that happened on shifts from jobs like 3 jobs ago.
Fuck, I remember like a bunch of shifts from like working at, Burger King. Like,
yeah, I remember shifts from working at Claire's when I was 16 years old. Like, that's bullshit.
And especially like that can like amplify the experience in your mind. Like, I remember in high school sitting behind somebody that killed themselves. And I remember, like, their name and face is etched in my memory just because, like, I learned about that later, just from my small interaction with them. So this cop should have, like, been like, holy shit, especially since it was only a couple days before.
Yeah.
He and Hartwig were searching for Stonechild just days earlier, and when anybody had last seen him, it was at Snowberry Downs. After Neil Stonechild went missing and was later found frozen, they did not approach the officer who was investigating the death. Like, you think anyone investigating, would have wanted to know about, your interaction with Stonechild those days earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, nada.
That's fucked up.
You've got your coworkers were last seen with this guy days earlier, and then now you're investigating his death. You don't think you would have talked to your coworkers, or the coworkers would have been like, "Hey, man, we had this guy in our custody.
Yeah, I remember this guy. Yeah,
2 days ago. Would you can we help you out?
Well, and detectives are taught, and police are taught that like any small information could lead to a break in a case, and they're taught to say the same thing to the public. So like they already know, like they would have reason to come forward. Their training would dictate they come forward unless they had something to hide.
Right.
Aside from neither Senger nor Hartwig coming forward, or the investigating officer reaching out to Senger or Hartwig.
That's fucked. That's fucked up.
Senger was being interviewed in this matter on December 2001, and they had basically asked him, how good of a cop are you? Have you done anything wrong on the job? And so anyway, Senger admits to falsifying a breathalyzer reading to avoid having to administer another breathalyzer test.
Mm-hmm.
So while this wasn't relevant to Stonechild, it talks about the integrity of Bradley Senger.
Yes. He was lazy. He was a lazy fuck.
He was lazy, just whatever,
And also, falsifying a breathalyzer report, that rings of a certain police attitude I keep on running into when, certain secret chats that police revealed. The whole well, maybe they didn't commit this crime, but if they're a bad person and we convict them and get them off the streets, and we make some shit up to get them out of the city, then so be it. That whole corrupt horse shit.
Yeah.
So I guess some other interesting stuff about Constable Hartwig. On Saskatoon's 20th Street, there's an old gas station that was built in 1929. The area is a low-income area. Lots of indigenous people live there. In 2003, the Saskatoon police took over this old gas station building, basically in an effort to have like a sort of a satellite police station in the community, where the cops can walk on the beat and that sort of thing.
Is that called Little Chief now?
The Little Chief Community Station.
It was the Little Chief Community Station. Yep.
Wow.
So in the area, it was a police station basically from 2003 to 2011. And one of the officers who was assigned to this station was Constable Hartwig.
Sabo got the chief's job because of his community policing style and creates 10 new community liaison positions.
We want to make sure that whatever you guys do, we're communicating that because you guys are fighting a battle. You're fighting a battle, first of all, the perception internally is, well, take the 10 officers and throw them out in the street and we'll handle crime better. So you got to fight that perception. On the other side, you got the people out in the community who are saying, well, we never see our officers. So we want to make sure we have a nice balance in there. So. But it's really important that you guys understand this is a huge hinge pin, I suppose, for lack of a better term, for where we're going with this organization, and you guys are the ones that can set the standard.
As part of his community-based strategy, Sabo opens the Little Chief Station in the inner city. Constable Larry Hartwig is one of the new community liaison officers assigned to Little Chief.
I've worked on 3 different reserves, and I've developed a healthy respect for the Aboriginal community.
Hello, is that in?
We always have to be very, very careful as police officers because we have a tremendous amount of authority. And with that comes a tremendous amount of responsibility. We must never, ever, ever abuse our authority as police officers. We have the authority to literally destroy lives. We literally do have that authority. And we must always be careful that that authority is never, ever abused.
SIP entries on CPIC.
Let me give you a little insight into what the police subculture is. We do not identify ourselves as white, as Aboriginal, as African American or African Canadian or Asian. We choose not to, because when we become police officers, we become blue.
Holy fuck.
It's not like he misunderstands the nuance of his job. He understands and he fucking does it anyway.
Yeah.
God damn it. He understands what damage he can do and he just doesn't fucking care.
That's it. That was wild.
Well, and that's the thing is it's like, this was done in 2003, that interview. I believe it was around 2003, maybe 2002. And, given his actions in November of 1990.
Yeah.
When you
can't just oops my bad out of that.
Yeah, exactly. Like what he said and how, it's like, does this haunt you? Does that haunt your mind?
Yeah.
Well, of course it didn't because he forgot all about it.
Oh my God.
Apparently.
Yeah.
How do people like this, how do they convince themselves they're good people? How do they hug their kids and think they're a good role model? How do they do it?
I don't know.
Don't
push it way
understand.
deep down. That was wild.
Yeah, exactly. So finding that interview and given what the inquiry found, yeah, it's a very uncomfortable, and I'm sure he's probably living with some interesting cognitive dissonance on that.
Yep.
When the RCMP began its investigation into the death of Neil Stonechild, the RCMP had requested Saskatoon police records on the matter. Anyway, the official copy of this file, which included the officers' reports who responded, had been destroyed.
Of course it was.
All that remained of the official Saskatoon Police Service file in relation to the investigation of Neil Stonechild's death was a very basic indexing information about the file. The paper copy, gone. It was destroyed in 1998. Now, here's the thing about the destruction of police files. The police have a records retention policy of 10 years. So 8 years in, they destroy the file.
That's not 10 years.
Despite having a policy to destroy files after 10.
Yeah.
So, when questioned as to why this file was destroyed after 8, despite a retention policy of 10 years, the police said that they needed to destroy the file to make room for renovations to the police station, their storage facilities. So, because they had classified Stonechild's file as a sudden death, not a homicide, boom, there
Gone.
we go. It's
Who
gone.
cares?
It's he was there, he died.
Who gives a shit?
It's done.
Yep.
On to the next case.
So anyway, this guy, Ernie Lutit, happened to be a cop back in the 90s.
Good old Indian Ernie.
And he also happened to make a paper photocopy of this file shortly after Stonechild's body was found. And all this information was coming forward. So anyway, the inquiry kind of looked at his file, and they felt based on all the information that was in the file and, the timelines of everything and the investigation and all that other stuff, in addition to the other police records that were provided, the inquiry had found that this file that Ernie had copied to be they felt it was complete and accurate and credible, and that everything that was there was there.
Sure.
René Lademosière was a veteran
Almost.
officer. He was dispatched to the scene of Stonechild's body at 12:54 and had reported to be on the scene 4 minutes later. People in the area had directed him to the body of Stonechild. René confirmed the death and radioed back to dispatch. He searched the scene for evidence of foul play and would relay anything found back to dispatch. He followed Stonechild's footsteps back to a gravel parking lot where they had disappeared. The disturbance in the snow suggested that Stonechild had fallen before walking south to where his body was later found. They concluded that Stonechild had been intoxicated, but they later testified that the steps were fairly straight, as opposed to a drunken stagger. Stonechild was missing a shoe, and they sent the canine unit to go looking for the missing shoe, but they were unsuccessful.
Can you imagine being out in the snow in the freezing ass cold? You're kind of tipsy. You're in a place where you have no idea where you are. You're missing a shoe. Can you imagine how scared you would feel? Like, I can't imagine.
And you're 17 years old.
Yes, and you're like a little baby.
Exactly.
And we're not going into super depth about other Saskatoon freezing cases, but there's a pattern of victims of this saying that the cops took away their shoes, took away their jacket, took away stuff before dropping them off.
Pretty sure there's literally a Wikipedia page on Saskatoon freezing deaths.
There is, yeah.
There is.
Yeah. So the constable, Lademosière, stated that there was no reason to call in an investigator as there was no sign of foul play. However, he agreed that it was an unusual situation and a body in an unusual location. How did Stonechild get there? He noted the footprints in the snow appeared to be several days old.
How did he get there? I don't know. He just walked over from the west side with one shoe.
Showed up in this isolated north end industrial area in the middle of nowhere in freezing winter. Just poof.
And with just
lost
happened.
a shoe.
Yeah,
just got in some shenanigans, walked several miles in deadly cold. Just.
Well, I don't know if we walked several miles, but yeah,
that's what they want us to believe with the official report. Right?
Later in an interview with the RCMP, he referred to Constable Hartwig as a very aggressive individual who suffered from small man syndrome.
He definitely looked like that.
Yes. So officers found 2 scrapes across the bridge of Stonechild's nose and a cut into Stonechild's lower lip. When they removed his clothing at the morgue, a stone was found in his left shoe, the one that wasn't missing, and it had left an impression suggesting that it had been in his shoe for some time. They did not send Stonechild's clothing to a crime lab for analysis, which would have been commonplace in a homicide investigation, but remember, they flagged it as a sudden death.
Yeah, it was just like a real weird accident.
Yeah. So January 12th, 1993, Stonechild's clothing was destroyed as they had not received a request for clothing from the family. So, your loved one passes and, the police are involved and they take the clothing and you can request it back when they're done their investigation with
But
the
who
clothing.
the fuck knows that?
Well, the family didn't request it back. But it's also notable that the police practice with regards to exhibit destruction, particularly with clothing, was that it would normally just automatically be returned to the family.
Oh.
So by default, they should have given the clothing back to the family.
Right.
But they did not. They destroyed it.
Weird.
Yeah, strange, eh?
Yeah. Can't imagine why.
Yeah, and it was always practice to obtain clearance from the family before destroying clothing.
Yeah.
So, we got your family for it. Well, we don't want it. Okay, well, can we destroy it? And the family says, yeah, go for it. We don't want, his shirt or whatever.
Which makes sense. If you want to do the community-based policing thing, you should make sure that, a dead loved one's belongings, get taken care of, that you do to them what the family wants.
Right.
Staff Sergeant Jarvis worked for the police for several decades. He was assigned to the investigation of Stonechild's death. This assignment occurred after the body was in the morgue at around 8:10 p.m., approximately 7 hours after the first responder attended the scene of Stonechild's body. Jarvis had attended the morgue. He did not examine Stonechild's body, but obtained a thumbprint for ID purposes. Jarvis's explanation for not examining the body was that he had no medical training. Now, Jarvis had been on the police for several decades.
Jesus.
So as a trained and experienced investigating officer, he was quite capable of examining the body as it lay disrobed on the autopsy table.
Right.
He ID'd the body of Neil Stonechild, and at 9:45 p.m., Sergeant Jarvis attended the residence of Miss Stonechild to notify her of the death of her son.
That's such a weird excuse. Like, that's part of the investigation job, is examining the body, or at least,
Well, cops have that in their training. Like, cops can look at bodies and be like, oh, this speckle pattern meant that he was dragged across this kind of gravel kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they should know, and they should look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the family had told Jarvis that Neil was last seen on November 24th, 1990 at approximately 9 p.m. At the time, he was with Jason Roy. Stonechild was staying with Pat Pickard, who later told Jarvis that they last saw him approximately at 10 p.m. on the evening of November 24th, and that he had indicated his intention to return home the next day.
Right.
Midnight on November 29th, Sergeant Jarvis filed his report on Stonechild and his actions that day. Crime Stoppers tip was received November 30th at 4:42 p.m., suggesting that Neil was taken to the area of 57th Street and beaten and left there by Danny and Gary Pratt.
Wow.
The tip suggested that the reason for the beating was that Neil was fooling with Gary Pratt's girlfriend. The evidence with regards to injuries to Stonechild suggests that there was no truth to that report. He was not beaten severely,
No, he had like a scrape and a cut
scrape
on his
and a
lip.
cut,
Yeah.
That said, there was no indication that Jarvis actually followed up on this report. So the tip came in, and he just said, nah. Just didn't even look into it.
He's just like, whatever.
Yeah. Another constable raised concerns about issues between Pratt and Stonechild, but Jarvis never looked at that file either. His explanation was this was something that had happened some time before.
Yeah, people don't hold grudges.
Yeah.
No.
That's not a thing.
No.
So Jarvis became aware of Hartwig and Senger's involvement with Stonechild on the 24th. Checking the calls dispatched, I learned that Constable Hartwig had attended at this residence at approximately 23:56 hours and cleared at 1700 hours on November 25th, 1990, being unable to locate the deceased. So why would he check the dispatcher's calls for November 24th and 25th when all he really knew was that a dead body had been found?
Right. Yeah.
So in testimony about this fact, and following up with Hartwig and Senger, Jarvis suggested that there may have been additional police reports made on the matter involving Stonechild, which had also been destroyed. However, there were no other reports, and the inquiry found multiple contradictory statements being provided by Jarvis.
Yikes.
Jason Roy had contacted Sergeant Jarvis and advised him that he was with Neil most of the day and evening of November 24th. Sergeant Jarvis had arranged to meet with Jason Roy. The meet lasted for 55 minutes while Roy had completed a longhand written statement. Jarvis made no notes of their meeting. He insisted all the conversation during this meeting was contained in this longhand statement. The statement written by Jason Roy was not even 400 words long.
Mm-hmm.
It was like 55 minutes for less than 400 words, so it's like 7 or 8 words written per minute.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, so for the sake of comparison, Jarvis later met with Trent Ewert at 10 p.m. that night, obtained a statement that was a page long, and was only present with Trent Ewert for 10 minutes to produce that statement. So, why did it take Jarvis so long to get a written statement, a 400-word written statement?
It's less than 2
Jason
pages.
Roy?
Yeah.
And my scripts for this podcast are frequently 8 to 12 pages long. If some dumbass researching half-ass shit for a podcast has a longer statement than you, somebody who's involved in the investigation, something's wrong.
That's right. That's right.
Jarvis filed his investigation report suggesting that Stonechild was going to turn himself in, and he was walking to the correctional center on 60th Street, but was intoxicated and fell asleep and froze. Notable is that there was absolutely no basis for this conclusion.
That's insane.
Yeah, so like when he was questioned by the RCMP on the matter, Jarvis had agreed with the RCMP that it would not make sense for a young offender to turn himself into the correctional center.
That's way the fuck in the middle of
In the
nowhere.
middle
Like,
of
how would you
nowhere.
get there
You
at
know,
night, right?
Yeah, and said that the weather that night and being in that area of the city was very feasible. And basically, the inquiry found this to be absolutely preposterous.
Yeah.
That Stonechild would just go to turn himself in at a correctional center in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Yeah, in the middle of Warehouse City
Yeah.
in the North End.
Editing Ood here. I just wanted to emphasize just how out of the way Neil Stonechild would have had to have gone in order for his travel to meet the police's theory of the story. That is, him going to the correctional center at the far north part of town to turn himself in, and he fell asleep on the way and died in the cold, rather than the version of events that have the police forcefully confining and bringing Neil Stonechild there. It's walking across the entire city in the dead of winter, in the middle of the night. It's literally over 10 kilometers of walking. And this isn't an area where buses went to. As we emphasized in the beginning of the episode, there was no residential houses here. There was no parks. There was no restaurants. There was no leisure centers. It was warehouses and industry in the North End. Just trucking yards and warehouses. There was nothing up there. And the police purport that he walked all the way there in the middle of the night, in the dead of winter, wearing only one shoe. That's the story they want you to buy. Anyways, back to these guys.
Jarvis testified that Saskatoon's industrial North End was an area frequented by people late at night who would likely be involved in crimes, as well as late shift workers, etc. So it was often a very busy area for Saskatoon police.
No, that sounds like bullshit. Sorry.
So December 5th, Jarvis spoke to people who had last interacted with Stonechild on the evening of November 24th. He also spoke to a pathologist on the case who indicated that while they figured the body had been there for at least 48 hours, it was possible the deceased died on November 25th. And given that he spent the day talking to people about Stonechild who last saw him on the 24th, you think he would have connected these dots to say, hey, what was going on the 24th and 25th?
Yeah, like an investigator would.
Like an investigator would, yeah. But he either basically ignored the statement from the pathologist about how long Stonechild had been there, or just didn't make that connection. So Jarvis,
I'm not willing to give him the benefit of that doubt.
So Jarvis concluded his file with the following note. Several Crime Stoppers tips have also been received. However, it is the opinion of the investigator that these are unfounded and directed more towards causing disharmony on the street against the Pratts. It is felt that unless something concrete by way of evidence to the contrary is obtained, the deceased died from exposure and froze to death. There is nothing to indicate why he was in the area other than possibility that he was going to turn himself into the correctional center or was attempting to follow the tracks back to the Sutherland group home or simply wandered around drunk until he passed out from the cold and alcohol and froze, concluded at this time. That was the end of the file until the RCMP opened their investigation in 2000, about 10 years later. Jarvis had interviewed 8 witnesses, took written statements from 2 of them. The inquiry found that following the closure of the file, 2 of his fellow officers, one officer whose son was a friend of Stonechild, had contacted him about this file, indicating additional investigation should be done. Jarvis did not reopen the file.
Jarvis is fuck.
Who opens up a police file when new information is found that could change the case? Sounds dumb.
Yeah.
You should just stick with whatever you found first and don't let your mind be changed by that liberal facts. Like all that shit.
And boom, that's my section. So, for Occultae Veritatis, I am Richard Bigley, and in studio with me today I have...
Sage Murray.
Leon Filger.
Ood Gallifrey.
And...
the soundboard demon.
All right. Well,
We'll continue on with part 2.
See you in a week.
See you in a week.
Love you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So how about that, hey? Like your fucking coworker cop comes in and say, hey, like there's something fucking going on here. You need to investigate.
Playing us out this episode, April Martell, with her rewrite and cover of Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire, rewritten with missing and murdered Indigenous people in mind. That's April Martell, APILMARTELL. Support all her stuff.
Golden bushy Barbara Kentner, Chantal Dieter, baby girl red dress, Canada is in a mess. Stuart Andrews, Brady Francis, boil your water, Occultae crisis, MMIWG residential schools, Tanya Brooks, Neil Stonechild, cultural genocide, anime highway of tears, 60 scoop for 30 years. We didn't start the fire, it was always burning since the world's been turning. We didn't start the fire, no we didn't light it, but we tried to fight it. Cassidy, Jean Bernard, and her brother Carlisle, Aisha Hudson, Jacob Sampson, Morris Cardinal, Tina Fontaine, no appeal, no foul play, no big deal. Cheryl Moore, Starlight Tours, I can't take it anymore. We didn't start the fire, it was always burning since the world's been turning. We didn't start the fire, no we didn't light it, but we tried to fight it. We didn't start the fire, it was always burning since the world's been turning. We didn't start the fire, but when we are gone, will it still burn on and on and on and on? We didn't start the fire.
Hi, James. Responsibility is our #1 priority at YouTube, and it's important for us to ensure that creators are empowered to use their influence responsibly in the YouTube community and beyond. With that in mind, we recently reviewed your channels, Onision, Onision Speaks, and Uh-Oh Bro, and took action on content that violated our community guidelines. We are also concerned about continued allegations of off-platform behavior related to child safety that could cause significant harm to the community, violating our creator responsibility guidelines within our YouTube partner program policies. These guidelines explain that we don't allow egregious behavior that has a large negative impact on the community. Additionally, this means you should be respectful of your viewers, your fellow creators, and our advertisers, both off and on YouTube. Therefore, we have determined that your channels, Onision Speaks, and Uh-Oh Bro, will be indefinitely suspended from the YouTube Partner Program and no longer eligible to monetize. There we go. It just took hundreds of people, years and years, alerting YouTube of the predatory actions and abusive personality of Onision for Google to fire Onision. It just took all that time and effort to get an obvious predator off of the platform and no longer pay him. So, congrats YouTube, too little too late. Once again, Onision, I guess this is more of your online career, what little of it is left, dying. I hope it dies off completely. I hope you fade into obscurity so you can no longer use your fan base as a picking ground for your next victim. Onision is fired from YouTube. At least he can't make money off this shit anymore. But he'll likely survive. And I'll likely be doing updates about him in the future. So stay tuned. You're probably thirsty. Drink some water. Next week we'll be covering something that isn't Neil Stonechild, but we'll be back with part B the week after. Since this is our longest coverage yet, we're staggering the episode release. So we'll see you at the next part of this story, in part B of our Neil Stonechild coverage. Have a wonderful week.